welcome.
The Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community is a regulatory science initiative that aims to facilitate innovations in pathology, as well as advance safety and effectiveness evaluation. The PI Collaborative Community aims to harmonise approaches to speed delivery to patients through collaboration in the pre-competitive space. The PIcc is open to all stakeholders, public or private, including but not limited to academia, industry, healthcare providers, patients, and advocacy groups. Meetings of this kind are an example of lawful activity under federal antitrust law because the focus of the meeting is on government action or policy, including the industry's responses or positions taken with respect thereto. However, antitrust monitoring is needed for companies' own protection, since they are direct competitors meeting together. These meetings need to stay within protected subject matters and need to be monitored so that they do not stray off into inappropriate areas, such as pricing and price terms, sales and service territories for particular products, customers and customer territories, each company's individual decisions regarding selection of suppliers or customers, marketing plans and especially future marketing plans or new product offerings, other proprietary or competitively sensitive information. Today's meeting will follow the written agenda, and there will be no discussion of pricing or other prohibited topics. If the discussion veers into those topics, we will terminate the discussion. If you have any questions or concerns about the propriety of the discussion, please raise it immediately, and we will take a break to determine how best to proceed. The Medical Device Innovation Consortium acts as the formal convener, and we will follow their conflict of interest policy. For additional information, we defer to our Code of Conduct and our website, www.pathologyinnovationcc.org. We look forward to moving the field forward.
Hi. All right. Happy New Year, although it's almost old. I hope everyone made it safe to 22. Maybe give another 30 seconds for people to arrive. Brendan, how's life?
It's all right. Busy as ever.
I hear you loud and clear.
I don't think it's a rare event around here. They call it, or my old mentor used to call it, the curse of modern life.
That sounds like a blessing. Good busy is great. All right. So we have a pretty packed agenda that I know, Ulla, are you going to paste all the stuff in the chat as we move along? Same procedure as every steering committee meeting. All right. So let's get started. So one of the projects that got a lot of traction in sort of the end of last year was the so-called CLIA Waiver project. And although the term is wrong because there's no such thing as a CLIA waiver, it refers to some of the enforcement discretion that happened during the ongoing public health emergency. And as part of this project, I wanted to briefly outline a strategy that was proposed and that I wanted to run by the whole steering committee for input and or supplementation. So briefly, for those who are not too familiar with the exact timeline, on March 22nd, 2020, CMS issued a letter to, and this is already important, to the state survey agency directors, providing clarification over certain exemptions that would be happening during the public health emergency. And as effective of that date, signed by the following branch and location manager, the policy should be communicated with all the survey certification staff and their managers. So in essence, this is not really, I mean, legally it's not a waiver, this is not an exemption from CLIA, it is more or less incentivizing the state survey agencies to not quote certain deviations during this pandemic. So this was the basis for what basically changed the past, where everyone and everything clinical had to have a CLIA license, to the present state that's still ongoing regarding this memorandum as it is. And then, of course, the future state has basically three things: either revert to the prior standard, or establish a new practice, or propose something new. And this was sort of the task of this working group. And briefly, for those who are not too familiar with the memorandum and what all is regulated, of course, the memorandum applies to pathology and lab medicine, and within that there's, of course, anatomic pathology with all its beautiful subspecialties. But of course, the memorandum also affects numerous other components and functions. So keep in mind, this is not just, although we all love digital pathology and sign out remotely of digital slides, this applies to numerous remote activities. We won't get into details. Please feel free to go to the website and check out the very elaborate and detailed discussion. But why I wanted to bring this up is the following. So these are the 5 exceptions for laboratories that will use temporary testing sites for, let's say, remote review and reporting of, for example, slides and images. So without going into details of these code sets, one of the approaches that this project led to was the following. So we wanted to get additional, in this case, regulatory input, specifically from the CLIA state survey agency contacts. So there's an agency contact for CLIA in every state. And we ask, or we would propose to ask them to review this project and, provide additional input and consider a proposal jointly with these state survey agency contacts, because they are probably the closest to obtaining collective and collaborative input from the various, states during this public health emergency. So this is sort of the first topic. So clearly related to digital pathology, but not entirely. And I wanted to just hear what the various folks on the call think about this. So question is, what do people think about obtaining additional input from the state survey agency contacts?
I mean, I can think of 2 general approaches to this. One would be spotty and deep, just to get a sense, take the temperature of a few places with a kind of a detailed questionnaire. The other would be to send out a survey monkey where we try to get data from all 50. That may be not possible, but it would let you get a much larger sample set. Those are some of the 2 ways that pop in my head whenever I have this type of issue where there's a lot of data that could be gotten, but you have limited time, but want to get an accurate polling.
Yeah, so it's, probably almost impossible to get all of them, even on a call or something. But so a survey would obviously be one element, so that would need to be designed. The other option is to, just hear whether they would provide input themselves about how to survey this. Maybe they have a blog, email, they may have a communication modality that's already existing where we could disseminate some of the information and ask for additional input. But it seems that is, a good additional group to...
Is there a reason, Joe, why they may not feel comfortable speaking freely? In other words, why we might not get accurate information?
So I can see 2 reasons why that may be the case, especially if someone is under current audit, right? So they usually can't provide that information, but the survey agency contacts are usually not the actual auditors, so they may have to obtain that information. So the contact is usually, CLIA level, everything CLIA, not just specifically this particular memorandum. But, to maybe they have something like a typical user group of auditors, or, there may be a speaker for all of them. But, this group, I have not heard anyone talk about or see. I mean, I know CAP, of course, has a lot of auditors when it comes to, CAP accreditation, so they may have some input as well. So I don't know, Kevin, Mary, Stephen, there's like several people on here that may know this.
I guess anything we could do to make the inquiry look legitimate and not something that they would just ignore, because the temptation for anybody who's busy is to ignore either a survey or a request for a specific call. Mention that we're part of a PICC that's recognized by the FDA, and give it some level of legitimacy.
Yeah, I thought CMS provided that as the actual enforcement discretion. So it wasn't I don't know whether that was based on the timing or the amount of time that they had to come up with something, but not dinging people for not having a CLIA license for every single office that is used seems like a reasonable approach, and leaves the local, let's call it, performance and or competence assessment with gives enough flexibility to come up with solutions for the various settings. So the auditing is of course happening. The question is just to what extent that would look like, and that's the part where I believe the people that do the surveys have a lot of knowledge, so that's where they came from. Other input from others? Anyone from CAP? Any input here? Sorry for calling on you directly.
Yeah, no, this is Mary Kennedy, Joe.
Hi.
I don't think the people on this call would be able to answer that particular question, but we can take it back to our LAP and advocacy office.
Yeah, it's like it was not intended to come up with like a final proposal, but just to get the people who are affected by this primarily their voices heard, because they may not be truly involved. But no, it would be great to hear back on this. Thanks, Mary. All right, let's move on. One thing that I'm sure many of you have seen is that the FDA provided a so-called transition plan. And I show you the website here, and I think Ulla will paste these two draft guidance documents. This was posted in the Federal Register as a notice in December 2021. So on the FDA website it is contained or provided for commenting. I forgot, I think it's until March, if I'm correctly informed. So there's two elements. One is to get medical devices that have an issued EUA towards a more permanent solution, so 510K PMA, and or a transition plan for those that fall within those enforcement policies during that public health emergency. Both are relatively concise reads, and they are clearly indicating that a more permanent, as the name implies, transition is being considered. Briefly, there's numerous policies. This was a paper by Heddle where the changes during the pandemic starting around February/March of 2020, many of these are still in effect, and so this, I don't know, optimistically speaking, this seems that we're going back to normal, at least when it comes to regulation. Of course, there's a lot of push to keep the relatively easy and streamlined EUA practices in place, but I thought that this may be important to point out, especially when it comes to some of the tests related to COVID-19. I know that several of you are working on this, and if you haven't seen it, this is probably important to know. Any comments from the FDA colleagues, or too broad? No.
No, I'm not in that loop.
Any other questions or comments on this? It's mostly for your interest. quickly for 4 papers with, I believe, some not very high regulatory implications. These are in no particular order. And, if you have papers that you would like featured, please feel free to just email Ulla and I. These were submitted by various folks, some actually by multiple, and you probably see why in a second. The first one is by a group from Arizona, Tucson, making a science out of pre-analytics. This is, I think, very, very interesting. They used time of flight, acoustical measurement for fixation assessment in an objective fashion over time and depth in the tissue. And they showed how staining quality, as rated by an objective and a subjective measurement here, changes over time with fixation in neutral buffered formalin. So very, very focused, very engineering level, but I thought that this is basically starting, and this was published in PLOS ONE. There's a lot more to it, so if you haven't seen it, I think the PDF is in the chat. So take a look, and this was, of course, in collaboration. This is, I think a very good approach that shows how detailed one can get when it comes to individual features that come together. Second paper, some of you may know the authors here. Again, related to SARS-CoV-2, why I wanted to briefly outline this and why I think it was shared is that it is strategic thinking about optimal use of resources when it comes to, in this case, SARS-CoV-2 testing, but some of it may apply to other, measures that we all use in the lab. So take a look. Joe Sirentrappen is the senior author, so beautiful written, nice language. Joe, do you want to say a few words?
Thanks. I actually wasn't expecting to highlight it, but thanks. This was actually written, I actually was hoping to get it published like earlier in the pandemic, and it finally got, after a lot of the reviews went back and forth, finally got accepted after we had the vaccine. So I had to add a small blurb about vaccinations. But the one thing that I think this paper didn't necessarily address on, but the point of it was that it requires a multidisciplinary approach to evaluating the results of testing. It's not as simple as just positive, negative. Sometimes you have to look at the test. As we all know, antigen-based testing versus, PCR-based testing, it's quite different. And at the time it was written, people didn't necessarily know that. But the idea was that you take the results and sort of come up with the implications. Like if you see a result, what you should do with it, depending on the test. If it's positive, what does this mean? And what I was proposing is that, government and, economists, public health experts need to get together. Instead of coming with these wishy-washy guidelines, they should come up with maybe a consensus of how to interpret lab tests. And that's really the point of it, I think nowadays, when we have all these positive tests, now that we have Omicron, there's a question about what does a positive test mean? But I think this paper still is relevant for that. And I think we might be living in a world where testing is going to be very integral to how we live. And so, this still provides, it's still relevant to this day. And so I think, people can take a read, see what they think, and try to apply it to our modern day life where COVID is now endemic, I think. So anyway, thanks, Joe, for highlighting it.
No, of course. It's a great piece, and I specifically like the table and the efficient use of the resources, and of course what you just mentioned, what it means is of course probably the real important component there. One paper that may be a good read if you haven't seen it. This is published in the New England Journal of Medicine Catalyst section by Lee et al. Related to the topic that we just mentioned in the CLIA waiver project. This is telemedicine, here not specifically focused on pathology, just in general, and they have a relatively complicated, but once you dig yourself in, relatively good graph on how telemedicine is an actual disruptive innovation model, and how to sustain that innovation. So if you haven't seen it, take a look. It's probably going to be cited quite a bit because it applies to medicine and telemedicine in general. So it's a very interesting read. The last paper I wanted to mention here.
Uh-oh. He's not moving.
Oh no.
That's never a good sign. Hmm.
Oh no.
A quick note in case you didn't see it in the media, Ron Weinstein passed away recently. He really is the founder of what we call telepathology,
Yeah.
and which in many ways was the pioneer, the predecessor of this more modern term digital pathology. So it's been kind of all over social media if you follow that, but I post a note in here to everybody just on what he did in his life.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, yeah, it was really surprised. I didn't realize it happened in December as well. So I felt a little bad not being in the know.
Yeah, he was one of my professors. I was a medical student at the U of A, and he had this crazy idea of projecting frozen sections remotely, so they could service rural areas.
I can provide an anecdote. It was 2008 and I was just a fellow back then, and that was like a century ago, it seems like. But I just remember how genuinely kind and encouraging he was. I was scared out of my mind. I presented something. I didn't think it was all that great. I thought it was pretty boring, but he was so encouraging, and I just can't. I'll just never forget the feeling of how he made you feel, at one of his ATA conferences. And so, and I think that was just him. From what I've heard from everybody knew him, that's just the type of person he was. Just a very, a great mentor, great pioneer, great leader, just a great person. And he's seriously missed. And he's a GU pathologist, so he was my idol. I do GU pathology as well. So, digital GU. I mean, he was everything I was, basically looked up to.
Yeah, he wrote a really nice review, sort of the early history of digital pathology up to I guess what you'd call mostly in the 20th century. A few years ago, it was really, really helpful just to get a sense of the history of the field. Yeah. Now, I was really lucky. I had Tom Grogan as another professor when I was in medical school, and who'd have known that these guys are, just going to be totally transformational in these fields. Yeah. All right, do we have Joe back?
It seems like his computer died, so it might take him a minute to hop back in. What we can do is maybe hop a little further down the agenda. I don't know, Brandon, if you don't mind, maybe we can pop over to some updates from the Truthing and Validation group.
Sure. I was thinking the same thing, Ula.
I can also allow you to share your screen if you'd like to share that document, whatever's better.
I don't think I have that document queued up, so if you have those bullets, that'd be better.
Yeah.
But if you don't, I'll work right now to get it pulled up.
I can get that one up. Give me one moment here.
I can share.
Go ahead, Kate, share it.
Oh, look,
Rula's got it.
Never mind.
There we go.
I just can't share with current permissions.
Great. So just to hit some highlights of this update, this will be recorded in Ula's, once you posted all of this meeting materials to the website. But I'll start with that first bullet there. And let's go down to the section. Our letter to the editor, Nature Machine Intelligence, has been accepted. And so this is really a letter outlining all the different ways we're trying to capitalize with external collaborators like this community and the MDDT Medical Device Development Tool Program, the fact that we actually do research here, so that we're just trying to advertise these different research programs to try and engage more groups in working with the FDA to tackle these hard problems. We have an abstract that has been accepted to pathology informatics, and this is related to our expert collaborators looking at a select set of cases from our pilot study to really build a training set and a proficiency test for us. We also have a session set up for the joint statistical meetings in August with many contributors talking about agreement and really talking about agreement between readers interpreting images. So some of the real nice leaders in this field, Hyman Barnhart from Duke is part of that presentation lineup that we see. Wen is at the bottom there. She organized it with me. You can go to the next one. So that's coming in August. We have a couple new fellows. Stephanie Zhu might even be on the line here. But I wanted to let you know about a relationship also with Kim Blenman at Yale. This is a new thing for us where we are basically creating a collaboration with Kim, also supporting her with a stipend that would pay for students. So, and this is to develop some of our data collection tools, microscope based as well as digital. And then moving down below, before the new year, I gave a tour of our data that we've collected in the project, and that's on GitHub. And there's a video walking people through how to properly access the data and how it's organized, so that you're not totally fumbling around trying to figure out where stuff is and what they're organized as. Furthermore, all the images from our pilot study, which is about 64 to 80, I think, Roberto Salgado is now sharing them on his website. And so not only are we sharing the annotations from experts, but we're also now sharing the images. So that might be interesting for anyone in the development world, which I'll jump to the last bullet, which is about the Tiger and Catalina challenges. Anyone in the digital pathology and algorithm development space should know about these challenges. So I just talked about data that is a little bit more deep in terms of multiple pathologists evaluating each images. This truthing is a little bit different. Includes also segmentations. And so all the assessment methods between those two kinds of data formats will be something that we'll pick up as we move our project forward. And then the bullet or section heading right above this one, that letter I told you about, advertising the research programs happening at the FDA, it pointed to the project and specifically the fact that we're pursuing a medical device tool qualification. And I've posted now our original proposal at our wiki page, so that a historical record of what we've proposed. I'm trying to get the feedback from the agency cleared to post. That's turning into a little bit stickier problem. The FDA, you can understand, is just a little uncomfortable with sharing reviews of things. But I feel like the review came to me and my colleagues in the collaboration, and we're taking it up to the highest lawyer here at the agency to get a blessing to put that out there. So that, and this was my goal originally, is to show that communication back and forth between a tool submitter, which is very similar to a device submitter, and what kind of feedback do we get from the agency? How is it structured and how detailed? And just so you can see that, I think it's very exemplary of what happens in the device space. And there's not too many times people get to see that kind of interaction. So cross your fingers that we can get the actual response, but I'll be also summarizing the response in my own words in order to probably write another letter to the editor about the progress of the project, as well as the feedback we got from the agency, only in a summary form rather than a full detail. Thanks.
That's great
nice.
Progress.
See, Joe is back too, so good timing.
Yeah, I'm trying, so I don't know where this cut off, but can you see the screen? Okay. So quickly, there's another challenge that I believe most of you have seen. Many of the authors are prostate histopathologists or uropathology experts. And you see the key message here, but I believe that this is sort of the beginning of many papers in the same realm and or territory, i.e. data sets or multi-rater views. I don't know, there's probably some in the audience that may not like the kappa as the key measure here, hint, hint, but the effort, the outcome, and the presentation is definitely worth taking a look at. So if you're considering participating in any of these challenges, I think this is a great standard of how to present this. And Bolton et al. Is the first author. I want to take
Joey,
a small. Yep.
Do you mind if I ask a question to the audience of those who might have read it? I briefly glanced through it, but I was trying to understand that. I mean, the kappas, if you believe in the kappas and stuff, are really good, but I couldn't understand, is this with kind of augmented where the AI was used with the GU pathologists to sort of come to an agreement? So the augmented created a kappa that was consistent, basically. They were able to agree with the ground truth. Is that was my understanding of it?
Yeah, so they developed a data set and they validated the data set using experts, and then they provided that where the AI algorithms were used to call the Gleason grade, and they correlated the algorithmic with the expert consensus, if you want to call it that.
So the algorithm itself, so the algorithm was agreeing with the experts, and that's where the kappa is based off. It's not like it's not the community. Like they had a community also train it, I guess, but it wasn't the algorithm plus a community pathologist agreeing with the experts. It was just the algorithm agreeing with the expert consensus.
That's correct.
Okay.
Can I throw something out there, Joe?
Of course, of course.
Just, there's really very little studies published that I've seen where the assessment is of the pathologist without an algorithm and the pathologist with an algorithm. It's always the algorithm by itself compared to a truth. And I'll tell you, at the agency, especially for an algorithm that's supposed to aid the pathologist, we want to see data on it actually changing the pathologist and aiding the pathologist. So the study of the algorithm in the hands of the pathologist is typically, certainly in radiology devices, and so far I think also with some of the studies I've seen in this space. So I hope everyone takes note of that and thinks that's where this field needs to be, is studying not just the algorithm compared to a truth. That's kind of getting close to the ready for the clinic, but studying it in the hands of the end user is really when you will know that it's useful in the clinic.
Yeah, so Brandon, let me follow up on that question though, because it's not always about, the algorithm development is not always about, reproducing pathology, the clinical annotation. It might just be decreasing workflow, and so turnaround time, right? So it shouldn't, you're not saying that it has to change or be better than pathologists, but basically say that there's no difference, which is really what we're after, right?
Still studying it in the hands of the pathologist though, right? I do believe it's all about the claim, right? If you're claiming it's just speeding up workflow without affecting performance, then you can think about a non-inferiority study. But if you're saying you're going to improve performance, then you would want to think about a superior study. But generally speaking, I think a lot of claims that are going to say they are supporting the pathologist or supporting decision methods, that we need, it'd be best to see performance in the hands of the end user.
This reminded me of, the portrayal here, what's the clinical prediction? What if you use DNA, RNA, and what if you supplement that with digital pathology and or treatment information? So I get the whether it's complementary or expanding or, deprecating.
Brandon, isn't it also the distinction between the technical validation and the clinical validation? I mean, for technical validation, it would still be fine to compare it against the ground truth. But I think what you're saying is for a clinical validation, you would need to test it in the actual clinical scenario where it would be used.
Yeah, and those two words kind of get to it, technical and clinical. Other words are standalone, so that would be no pathologists really using the device, and clinical, or use the words like reader study is when it's in the hands of the end user. That's just to give some more language on the difference between not having the end user or having the end user involved.
All right, other comments?
I was trying to find a study that had kind of the human in the loop, and I'm not having I put one in the article, but maybe that's not it in terms of, what Brandon was talking about. Yeah, you're right. Most of the stuff has been just the AI alone, basic autonomous AI, in reference to the ground truth, which is human experts, but not an augmented,
Well, this gets to the CAT-E, CAT-X, right? So the computer-aided detection versus computer-aided diagnosis. But if it's human computer-aided diagnosis, the question is how good is a human versus how is a computer with the CAT-X? But yeah.
I wouldn't use those two terms. I would say autonomous or not autonomous. If it's autonomous and it's just a number or a decision for patient management that doesn't need a pathologist at all in the loop, then autonomous kind of characterizes that, versus an aid, support decision making. Those sorts of things tell us that there's a human in the loop on that. And they have to be able to take the algorithm output and use it in either a equivalent or faster way or better performance.
I think the issue with that is, I mean, we've done this a bit, but you would have to actually track whether the pathologist took that, let's say, AI support into account or not. That is very hard to track, right?
Well, we usually have two arms for that.
Yeah, Joe, maybe this group could assist it by developing some sort of glossary of terms, or if there is one, Brandon, that you could point us to. I think it'd be really helpful for all of us to be using the terms in, the appropriate way, consistently, and well aligned with the FDA. That would be really helpful.
I'll say that I do have a couple talks from colleagues that I can share with everybody to see what kind of language they have there. But, the history is mostly in radiology. And so there's some good language kind of embedded in some guidance documents. And I think we're working on promulgating that in current documents that are under development. But then taking these into the digital pathology space, they may not like that language. They might use their own, and it's hard to sometimes hard to harmonize, even though we're trying. But I appreciate, what I'll do is I'll share a link to a wiki page that I have on device advice, and actually Joe had a Marbles paper that Joe just showed a few minutes ago, showed a timeline of guidance documents developed, and the ones that I'm thinking of are the two very first computer-aided detection guidance documents for mammography algorithms. And that's really, everybody who's reviewing from my group, that's kind of our starting point in our training. And so I'll try and get that shared so you can find it.
So we have a computational / regulatory glossary. I think Ulla just pasted the link.
Thank you, Ulla.
We haven't fully updated these nuanced components though, but I really appreciate it. That's a great suggestion. All right, let's move on. Quick few slides about patient advocacy and a patient advocacy update. As you know, this is one of our committed key deliverables for 22, to engage more patient advocacy groups and more patient interests. And I chose this picture here because it's not really clear who helps who here. And I wanted to mention that really clearly because there's a lot of different initiatives. So Ulla and I have spent quite a bit contacting, reaching out to many of the patient advocacy groups. And we wanted to share two sort of leads. One is with the so-called Sepsis Alliance. So as you know, many advocacy groups are focused on certain branches, let's say, breast cancer, Friends of Cancer Research. And here we're talking about an advocacy group focused on sepsis. You can read on the link that's pasted in the chat what the relevance is and the multi-billion-dollar impact on the US healthcare system. But briefly, this is a cross-collaborative community effort. So the initial introduction was by Michelle Tarver from the FDA, because the Sepsis Alliance wants to become a collaborative community. The first meeting was in January, just a few days ago, and it's a patient advocacy groups, and they are proposing to join us, and we may join them and help them, because several of the pathology relevant questions that we're talking about may actually apply to the diagnosis and even possibly the definition of sepsis. So if you're want to familiarize yourself with that, we're currently in discussion how that would work. And of course, they wanted to learn how we moved from an alliance to a collaborative community, which, Michelle was kind enough to introduce us, and we shared the charter, which is publicly available, and they looked at how we set everything up. So that's sort of a first lead. And I think we invited, several of the folks, so that would be also something in case you're interested in this topic or have something to do with this or projects that may be helpful. The second group is the Anatomical Pathology Patient Interest Association, or APIA. So APIA is another patient interest group. In this case, you can go to the website again, check about membership. There's also options for industry. And one of the dedicated first big projects that APIA is focusing on is, believe it or not, Preanalytics. And they have created something that I find really phenomenal, and so we have to do a little bit of digging here. They have created, in collaboration with NHS, a program called TOPS to optimize the pre-analytic processing in surgical pathology. And this is currently administered through the National Society for Histotechnology. So the partnership has been announced and the program is active. So for a lot of the ASCP certified histotechnologists, this program was co-created between APIA and NSH. So it would be a great addition. Again, another patient interest group that tackles things sort of including supporting, in this case, through technologists, the quality of pathology. So we shared a lot of information about what we have considered as relevant for pre-analytics, and their specific interest is how to leverage machine learning and or AI for assessing in a more objective fashion how impactful, for example, tissue collection and fixation, etc. is. The current status of this, let's say, alignment with patient advocacy is that they're presenting the scope and website and some of the materials that we provided to them at their steering committee meeting. So this is mostly, keep this in mind. So hopefully we can provide some updates in February, if not in March, and see whether APIA will also formally join us as another group. We have 2 other meetings pending with other patient advocacy groups and patient representatives. So definitely trying to get, multiple of these on the books. I get to Friends of Cancer Research in a second. If someone of you has other contacts or know of, it doesn't have to be cancer related or digital pathology related, that would be great. And I know that that is one of the key elements that also the FDA will look at towards us, that we're really broad stakeholder based. Comments on this?
Thanks for bringing up the patient advocacy groups. I was just thinking, just tying into some of the work that we've been doing, like for instance, national patient identifiers. You can make it relevant to a patient advocacy group in the AP space. For instance, if you do send outs for molecular testing, and if you do it to multiple labs, you can see why identifiers become very tricky business where you're trying to reconcile. Not only do we have interoperability problems with getting results back, but it takes a lot of work to re-identify specimens as the results kind of go to different reference labs because we don't have a unique identifier. So this group could be used as a sounding board, and advocacy for saying that we kind of need something like this, because without it, there's just a lot of manual work to reconcile results that are kind of outbound from different, sourcing centers.
Yeah, so one of the things about, for example, the Sepsis Alliance is how do you ensure that the right patient get the right results at the right time? And the unique patient identifier is definitely something that resonates with a lot of people, especially when transferring care from one to another hospital to one to another care setting. When someone suddenly develops a fever and then has to go to a hospital, how to transmit this. So, of course, I wish I could tell you yet, and I know, Joe, we submitted a proposal and abstract to ISPOR, which is one of the big meetings. Ola, if you could also paste the link there. That's a big advocacy meeting, health policy meeting in DC. This week we will find out, because the abstract notification is this week, but we haven't heard back yet. And it would be great. You see here the proposed speakers on this topic, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing this. If we get this spot, I'm sure a lot more advocacy groups will come. Tiger Challenge, you mentioned already, Brandon, right? So I can skip that. Something related, probably somewhere between unique patient identifiers and the standards group. I wanted to mention this is from ONC. So this is, health information technology related. There's a first version of something that is standardizing a specific aspect of metadata that I'm sure we all suffered through, which is this is the technical specification document for patient addresses for domestic and military. So basically this is the repository for how to write addresses when it comes to, compliant health information transfer. So this is directly related to fire, etc. They called this project USAD, and this is a half a year of deliberation and inputs, and the final version was just posted at the beginning of 22. And just to give you an idea what this means, here's the big business incorporated and a pizza delivery company. The incorrect form here may look something like this, but there's a correct form now. I don't know, I've never thought about this, but if you think about how many combinations of location, numbers, streets, suites, etc. there are in the US, boulevard, avenue, whatever, that is all completely technically specified in this document. So I think Ulla pasted if you page to that particular thing and you check your own home address and just do that. It is very interesting, but that is now a standard. And what I thought is very interesting is that, here there's a comma and there's no comma here. And, just to point out that there's very, very specific rules for all kinds of things in here. So just very, very detailed documents. So this is a technical specification sheet, but when we talk about some of these, personal health information, and I just thought a technical specification sheet may be important here. Next element is related to real-world evidence. There was a training course, and Ulla, if you can paste the link, that would be great. So this is just one of the many slide decks, and this is part of a OSIL initiative with regulatory research experience. So this is related to Brandon's shop, and this entire project catalog is a training course for how to use real-world evidence. For those who haven't heard, Prograf is one of the drugs that was approved using real-world evidence. So this has true, real regulatory implications. And so if you haven't seen this, this is defining real-world data, real-world evidence, and it's a fantastic course that, let me just see if I can get this up here as well to share it. So here is, videos, branch chiefs talking and what different parts there are and how to get into a clinical investigation or investigator training course. So please take a look. I think that's very, very helpful.
I put
think
something in the
yeah,
chat.
go ahead.
Sorry, Jim. I just put something in the chat too along the same lines because I just attended a talk from Demi, or I forgot the name. He's the chief of this All of Us project, and I heard about it, but I didn't really know much about it. But it's really interesting. I mean, the idea. I think the person, this person who's the president, came from the eMERGE project at Vanderbilt, and so now he's heading this All of Us project, which is trying to collect real-world evidence of 1 million patients for, being able to link the appropriate patient to the right clinical trial. So it's a big lofty vision, but it's along the same lines as what you put over there. And I'm just throwing it out there for people to be familiarized with some of these big initiatives out there, collecting real-world evidence.
Perfect, thank you, Joe. So I think the Truthing and Validation Group update we already had. Kim is alongside Roberto Salgado finalizing the TIL survey. And one quick update is that we will be moving the website domain from digitalpathologyalliance.org to pathologyinnovationcc.org. So ultimately, even if you keep this as your homepage, if that works, it will map to this one, but ultimately this will be the main URL, and that was in part due to some people in the FDA not being able to access this one. So there's like a couple of, just rerouting going on, but I just wanted to briefly mention this. A few quick announcements from MDIC. Jitesh couldn't make it today. There's a couple of key positions open now. One is the one from, I think, Carolyn Hilburn, which is the program director of MDIC. There's a job posting. If you haven't seen it, go to their website. As well as, I think, 1 or 2 project manager positions for clinical science, as well as for tech and digital health. And the other 2 things are, there's an emerging health tech series on the website, as well as the MDICX AI/ML framework, which is out there for public comment. And I think next Tuesday is a meeting to provide comment, and this will be likely a framework mostly for industry vendors. And this is not digital pathology specific, but I wanted to briefly feature this as well. Other 2 upcoming events. This is from our existing patient advocacy group, the Friends of Cancer Research. They will have a virtual meeting called Supporting Development of Diagnostic Tests for Unmet Needs. This is a collaboration between numerous companion diagnostics as well as comprehensive genotyping vendors, as well as some academic medical centers, to address the issue of rare tumors and how to establish performance characteristics and serve as trial enrollment, strategies, how to validate your assay basically to serve as a enrollment test. And you see some of this. This is Tuesday, February 22nd, that's just one day before our next steering committee meeting. And there's several people on a panel, and if you haven't seen it, there's a link in the chat. The second, and this is more or less a series of events, is related to the Precision Medicine Leaders Summit. This is a series of speakers and events that's organized by Precision Medicine, which they also have a journal, which I think several of us have published in. And one of these is a virtual meeting, also February 22nd, so busy day. But I also wanted to give a brief shout out to that entire website with series. You see there's several things that may or may not apply to your specific interest and or research. So another shout out to some conferences. And again, of course, a reminder, if you have conferences and or meetings that you would like us to feature, let Ulla know and we can put it on the calendar of events. And our next event is one day after those two events that I just mentioned. So February 23rd, 3 to 4. And with that, we're at the end of the official agenda and we can open it up for comments, questions, suggestions, and wishes, of course. Or just chat and discussion.
I had asked Ulla about this too, but I had forwarded to you about the NIST risk assessment thing. Let me see if I can put it back in the chat, but maybe you can pull it up. But I thought it actually fits very well with our talk. Let me just put it in the chat again. So it's this one here.
It's the NIST.
Yeah, NIST. Yeah.
That's one of the first collaborative communities. Oh, NIST.
Yes.
I meant NEST-CC. That's an MDSC initiative, no?
Yeah, so this one's actually it's a risk assessment concept paper trying to create a framework, and they're looking for comments. And so, I don't know when their deadline is. As with all these things, it's hard to organize comments by then, but it's something that's, I haven't had a chance to even look at the risk framework either to see if it's sound, if it makes sense.
They wanted it by yesterday.
Oh, is it? Shoot. Okay.
We just need some little bit of time traveling.
Yeah.
Have we featured this before? I'm not 100% sure.
No, it came out like in December, and I think I probably asked like, hey, should we bring it up in the holidays? We never had a chance to touch base again to bring it up.
Joe Sirentrapan, I want to let you know that I saw some API activity, listserv activity about standards and standard viewers. I fed that to some of my NCI colleagues, and with Marcus Herman, we had previously been solicited by our NCI colleagues. That's Justin Kirby and Kevin Farahani, who are kind of like the NCI managers of the TCIA, Cancer Imaging Archive, and the Imaging Data Commons. And they were basically asking us whether the Cancer Imaging Archive should convert all the images to DICOM, and whether that would stifle things or move things forward, whether there was, there's enough tools to accommodate all that stuff. And Marcus, of course, was very in favor and gave him good reasons. I chimed in with a similar response, more of a cheerleader response though. And then after we saw the continuing, because that was just based on Yuli's email. And then as I saw more and more people piling on to that conversation, I reached out to them again saying, hey, maybe there's like a real good groundswell to try and have a meeting on this topic to create an initiative of some kind for, supporting the DICOM moving to a standard, and or, my big suggestion is to try and have a test bed of viewers that, are compliant with some kind of standard. And that way, we could even use the Precision FDA server, which is a research server, one of the only ways to collaborate externally and internally. But I thought that, so maybe I'll reach out to you to engage on the organization of that, or someone else, Mary or anyone else that wants to raise their hand if we want to, because really I don't have a big, this is not really the FDA's mission, is to enable standards, but I believe it's a really important thing to move the technology forward. So, but I'm trying to make sure people know who's interested in, and maybe we can bring people together on that.
Yeah, Brandon, I'm one of the co-chairs for API's Technical Standards Committee, so I would definitely be pushing for that.
Yeah.
I'm also working on a draft for setting the stage for what an open API specification might look like for certain things, even if we don't have implementations. If we first have a common language and an open language, then I think making those advances are going to be a lot easier in the future.
I do like the idea, and I apologize for the listserv because maybe that's why I haven't been chiming in, because I've been having trouble. I don't know if the MSK filtering system has filtered me out of my own listserv, but I actually like the idea of being, because how do you make a standard stick? This is kind of a sticky messaging thing, and but using the TCGA as a model, that's one way to do it. To be able to say, well, this is available, and if you can make it DICOM enabled, that sort of encourages other people to sort of latch on. It's a sticky type of thing. So
it's both the carrot and the stick.
Yeah, that's actually a very cool idea. I mean, to create a challenge, is this something that we could propose to the PI Summit? That's another thing. Just let's have a discussion about this as a session of how we. This is the strategy, this is the vision, this is the hope that this creates traction. So yeah, we can talk about this more offline.
Marcus, Marcus is kind of starting the process.
I would, Joe, just Marcus, before you jump in, Joe, I love the idea of doing this, but I wouldn't take it offline. I would actually take it online and spread it across PIcc, because not everyone has time to join the steering committee. And making it, more known, because we have about 400 people on the email distribution list. There may be others that want to join. Go ahead, Marcus. Sorry.
Yes, maybe just to mention, I don't know if everyone is aware, but that is already reality, right? So we had the first production release of the imaging data commons from the NCI, providing all of CPTAC or a subset of CPTAC, and soon with the next release, which is scheduled, I don't know, the exact date is not yet known, but we are talking weeks to months here with all of TCGA becoming available in DICOM format through the IDC. So part of that is already reality, or is currently becoming reality. That's also why we work very closely there with the NCI, because we've been pushing these things together for the last 1 or 2 years, developing a lot of things around that to enable that functionality within the IDC. So I think it would be great, also Joe and Stephen, to kind of collaborate there between the different organizations. I'm just thinking, DPA, DICOM, IHE, API, and so forth, and getting folks together there, because I think that's the hard part, right? In order to get any standard to work, it's kind of like a democratic process. You need adoption, you need people to agree. So I think the more people we can get together on this, the better. And I think the Alliance can probably be one of the conveners to get these folks from different organizations together and connect them with each other.
I was thinking also the Panda Challenge too. They had that stuff open as well. So what if we got all these open data sources and we were able to somehow magically convert them over to some DICOM standardized thing? Then people are going to be drawn to these open sources, and they're going to have to be forced to use the standard.
This is already happening. So we are starting to convert some of this data. I'm actively working on, for example, the Tiger data set. And we're trying to get all of that through the TCIA and the IDC to make that publicly available. We've been pushing heavily to also, encourage that from the NCI side. If challenges are hosted, that the data is provided in a standard format. We are not fully there yet. And I think sometimes, the incentives are lacking potentially. And I think that's also where, Brandon, I think the FDA, even though that's maybe not the main vision, but having an organization like the FDA behind such an initiative, even if it's just, promoting it through, I don't know, forwarding emails, I think is an important part, because it signals to people that it's something that is important to a national agency, and may encourage adoption through that mechanism.
I gotta go. Let me just say, tools, challenges, and standing databases like Imaging Data Commons and TCIA are what move the needle. And so be thinking of tools and challenges that would, promote the use of standards. And like Marcus is saying, taking challenges that are out there, creating the DICOM version of those challenges and at least making that an offer on existing ones already. But I gotta go. See you guys.
Agree.
Bye-bye. Feel free to disseminate this message through us. That's all I can say. Thanks, and thanks for staying on a bit longer. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.